Okay, I guess we're ready to go, right? Okay. Good evening, and welcome to the Tuesday, March 16th, 2021 Board of Trustee Budget Workshop. We will start the agenda, and again, this is a budget workshop. We will start the agenda with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Mr. Getz, would you please lead us, please? Thank you. Mr. Gruno, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Loveland. Here. Mr. Gruno, here. Mr. Morrissey. Here. Mr. Nugent. Here. Chairman Mino.
Here.
I also notice that we have Community Manager John Coffey, District Clerk Stephanie Brown, Property Services Matt Getz, Food and Beverage, Kathy, just drew a blank there, Kathy Mendez, and I don't see anybody else.
I believe we have Rich and Ernie outside, but they're available if we need them.
Okay, Rich Armington and Ernie Cruz in the wings. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, sir. Audience participation. I only have one letter, if anybody else. Mr. Reddy?
Jack Zorro with the mask, 806 Tamarind Circle. I have two suggestions for our budget workshop. Many years ago, under the trustees' jurisdiction, we had a finance committee and we had a facilities committee. I see this coming season as a very difficult budget season. We're only going to get 84 cents or 87 cents, whichever that amounts to, and that only raises about $59,000 a year. So my thought is that there's got to be at least a half a dozen people in Barefoot Bay with real strong financial background. It could be a second set of eyes to John and Charles to help through this financial crisis. On the same vein, I know that there are many people in Barefoot Bay with construction, contracting, trades background that again could provide a second set of eyes to Matt and John as they go through all the things that are needed for our repair and maintenance since we are 50 years old. I also think this would bring a sense of community if perhaps we had a plumbing guy or a contractor guy and he could mention something to Matt that would come through and help the Bay. That guy would go around pounding on his chest saying, boy, I did that. And that would get around to folks. The same way on the finance side, if someone could say to Charles, here's a way to look at it differently, and it helps the Bay, here's another guy or gal that could be pounding on their chest saying, I did this for Barefoot Bay. So I'd like that to be a strong consideration as you move forward with this budget process. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other audience participation? Questions? No?
Mr. Chairman, can we revisit audience participation at the end of tonight after the audience has seen the participation and seen the PowerPoint, and they may be able to be more constructive in their comments after seeing the presentations tonight.
I wouldn't object to having a little more audience participation at the end, but I'm not going to sit here and get in a dialogue with the audience. They can get up and say it again and just do it, but, I'm not going to sit and have much of a dialogue. So, a couple of things, we normally don't respond too much to, and I appreciate Mr. Reddy's comments here, but I do have to say this, I think, in defense of both our administration and in defense of the Board of Trustees, who I think are all very capable people. First of all, we do not have committees. Committees were here before. Committees are a good idea. With 5 members, however, every time we get together in a workshop like this where we can talk together, it's pretty much a committee. I mean, you would only, a committee of the board would only be 2 members at best if you did have them. So we do have a chance here to discuss things as a committee. I do not believe any organization anywhere uses volunteer people to do any of the kinds of things that Mr. Reddy was talking about. You don't do that as an official professional organization. Those people cannot be held accountable. You don't have accountability for so many things. So it's great to have people who think they can look at things in construction and all the other things, but I believe we have very, very, very capable people, and our community manager and Mr. Getz and Kathy and Ernie and the rest of these people. I believe also that the board members here are very capable people. They're knowledgeable. They can look at the budget in detail. They can ask the kinds of questions that have to be asked. So appreciate the comments, but I guess that's just my narrative on that. And I will give any of you an opportunity to comment the same to this comment. None? Okay. With that, Mr. Coffey, review of proposed, and again, so the audience understands and those people at home understand, there are probably going to be a lot of questions. I have at least 20 questions about things in here. Some things I just don't understand. Some things I don't like. Some things I probably will not vote for in a budget if it's there, et cetera, et cetera. But those are the kind of things that the board does in a workshop. So I appreciate that. Mr. Coffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Trustees, residents here and watching at home, just go through a real quick little slide deck giving the highlights. A few assumptions about tonight. This budget was developed a month earlier, so there's a little more degree of uncertainty. Assumptions about COVID, these we had to make in January. The year-end estimate in the FY22 budget is based on the assumption there is a lingering capacity limits through this fiscal year, and October 1 is return to pre-COVID normal. That probably is guaranteed not to happen exactly like that, but we had to make an assumption for everybody to use. FY21 looks like it's going to end in the big picture, a fund balance right about where we thought it would be. The revenues and expenditures are in line. They're both about we estimate about 1.9 million lower. On the revenue side, that's because we don't anticipate the bank loan being executed, limited food and beverage operations, and decreased receipts in the golf course. On the expenditure side, once again, limited food and beverage operations, limited building usage, which cuts our personnel and operating costs, and deferment of planned projects. Assumptions for next year, it's largely a status quo operational budget with the R&M capital budget dominated by the Lounge Lakeside expansion project. Phase 1 is proposed to be rolled forward into next year, so you don't see the full $1 million of both phases in the budget. And Phase 2 is budgeted for next year. Limited revenue enhancements and growth in personnel costs with combined annual raises, minimum wage, health insurance is 280% higher than the increase in assessment that we will get next year. Total budget is proposed at $7.8 million. Of that, 49,000 increased assessments of 84 cents a month, $1 million loan paid back in 7 years, average 5% increase in food and beverage prices, 7% beverage prices, 2.5% food prices. Short story of that is we feel that there's, as the economists would say, The beverage prices are more elastic. They go up, there's less resistance to the price than the food prices. A proposed $50 increase in the one-time social membership and increased storage fees that was taken in February 23rd is not included in the budget because by February 23rd, most of the budget was completed. This is just a little snapshot to show folks where most of the revenues come in. Admin is half the budget because that's where the assessments are accounted for. And on the expenditure side, continue with the 5% payroll maximum increase split between COLA and merit for eligible employees. Employees getting more than 5% through the minimum wage increase will not get the 5%. We estimate a 7.5% health insurance increase. We have a $438 savings from 3 operational decision points. That doesn't seem like a lot, but in most years past, we've had tens of thousands of dollars of additional costs. $536,000 in new projects and $1 million in roll forward projects, $125,000 in contingency. Another pretty little chart that shows the majority of our expenditures are in property services, followed by food and beverage, golf pro shop, resident relations, administration. On the personnel side, that 78.22 FTEs, that's of various combinations. We have, I'm sorry, that is a wrong slide. I didn't take that out, my apologies, because that's last year's slide. This year continues the trend of the large departments operating on largely part-time positions, which is very different from most public sector organizations. And the major decisions facing the community, the first and foremost is the Lounge Lakeside expansion project. Removal of that project from the budget if the board decides does not free up $1 million, because when you take the bank loan out, you also take the $1 million out that would be spent on the project. What it does free up is about $170,000 for the next 7 years for the debt service. The assessment cap removed $1.9 million from the next 5 years. On the flip side of that, the Florida minimum wage increase is estimated to add almost $600,000 over the next 5 years. And there's a 6th year of the increase before it hits $15 an hour. And that does not address the compression of having a majority of your folks making the same money in the same pay plan. And higher energy costs. In January, 15% seemed like a reasonable number. If we were developing the budget now, we'd probably make it 35-40% the way fuel prices are going. And with that, any questions? As the board knows, I'm attending some virtual conferences, and there's this gentleman, I worked in a neighboring community 20 years ago, had a quote last Thursday I thought was very apropos. Staff deals with how things get done. Elected officials deal with what gets done. And with that, Mr. Chairman, myself and my staff will answer any questions you have. And as in prior years, I have the budget files electronically able to go. So if you make a change, I will make it happen live so we can see the impacts of the changes.
I have a lot of questions. I'll start with the first one, though, just make sure we understand. The personnel thing, I did not realize or see that it was fiscal year 21 because that was one of my questions.
Yeah.
But that's an old slide.
Yeah.
That increase in personnel and et cetera, that's old, correct?
Correct.
1.42, okay, that's good.
Yeah,
And I think I just let anybody jump in here because this is going to be just a discussion.
Yeah,
Okay?
Mr. Chairman, just for point of clarification, we actually decreased personnel by 2.61 FTEs this year.
As I look at this budget, and I look at the things that could possibly happen in the future, we look at increasing some things. We look at the revenue that we're taking in versus, I think you have a figure here, our increase in personnel costs, just with raises, increase in health insurance, et cetera, is 280% higher than the assessment receipts of course, 49,000. Now, some of that would also be made up by fees collected, food, beverage for different things. But that one figure right there is a startling kind of a figure, which brings me back to, I know we like to look at 5-year budgets, and I know we like to look at 5-year plans, but it also brings me back to the reality of looking at the budget for that particular year and to say, okay, I know we have to make some decisions about some things, lounges, et cetera, but do we look at this budget and say, is it time that we actually decrease some expenditures instead of just looking at increasing some revenues? So I'm going to leave it with that because I have about 15 questions that I need to ask that are just, some of them just understanding, but I don't want to just monopolize this, so please jump in.
I understand where you're going, Mike, with the do we leave it or do we continue on? I think that this is a hard year for budget, and the reason it's hard, I don't mean hard as in the budget flip-flop that much. It's hard to predict. It's hard to predict what the social distancing is going to be. It's hard to predict this whole COVID thing. I mean, there's so many unknowns that I feel comfortable with us not doing so much of a focus on long-term budgeting this year and looking at how do we get through this year and next. And then before we can get back on our whole 5-year focus. Because I think that if we try to plan on assumptions that may never happen, we might be planning on, we don't know that in 7 months that this whole virus thing isn't going to flip into something that this whole inoculation thing is just worthless on. We just don't know. And I think that we need to be cautious as we move forward with this budget, and I think we need for at least the next 12 months.
I think with the change in administration up in Washington, I think we got to be real careful. I think that there's a host of things that could happen, and so I have to agree with Randy. I think we should probably take a light touch on this as we go forward.
Any other comments? Jim?
Yeah, I would tend to agree. We're going into such uncharted waters that I don't think we can plan to do many capital things in FY22 because we just don't know what we're going to have for revenue.
Can I, and I apologize for doing this because I probably should have called to Charles or to John and asked some of these questions, but as I spent the afternoon today, I've got a bad back and a bad shoulder, and I had nothing to do but go through this budget and look at things, and they're just questions. So I'm just going to ask some questions and just explain, okay, if you can. And I'm going to kind of go through the budget and tell you where I am, just so I understand what they are. If you look on, is that all right, gentlemen? Okay, and please chime in. If you look at the budget on page A4, just so I understand this, what is the loss of revenue? It says in administration, 16,000, 32,000, 19. What does that mean? Do you understand what that is? If you look up under revenue sources, general administration on A4, and you see down there where it says administration, loss of revenue. It's like we're showing fiscal year 22, $19,000 loss in administration. I just don't understand what that line item is.
That's in food and beverage. That's the food and beverage. The budget of that, and let me go to.
So it's not administration, it's administration of food and beverage.
Food and beverage. Let me pull up that
Okay.
line right there. Well, historically, food and beverage the percent of food cost of sales and beverage cost of sales has been a flashpoint. And in trying to refine our budget over the years, some probably not well-known benefits we had for employees, like a shift drink or a shift sandwich meal, staff discounts, those were being netted out in a non-transparent way. So if you look up on the screen, and this is on, I'll flip to the page D21. When we have entertainment, and Kathy can speak to the specifics, but when you go to Music Bingo and you win something, you get a coupon or trivia night. The coupons have a cost that historically just was absorbed within the sales line. What we've done the last few years is shown the coupon costs as a negative revenue number. And same thing with staff discount and shift
I
drink.
got you. Okay.
The shift discount, free snack or sandwich, it used to be a meal a few years ago. We're actually proposing to eliminate that as a benefit going forward as a part of staff trying to tighten our belts as much as we can to understand with the residents who pay the assessment and buy our goods and services that we're in this together. So this is a way of trying to more accurately show the sales in lounge, 19th hole, and special events, and also demonstrate the coupons. And some of these coupons, every homeowner gets a new packet. There's a $10 gift certificate that factors into this.
Okay. Okay.
So that's what that 19,000 is.
Okay. Another quick question. We have under our pay plan for employees, we have merit increases, of course, as you indicated in there, of 5% of the expenditures for employee costs, I believe it is, or salaries, right? Whatever. And then, and so that's split between an increase and or increase for insurance? Is that how you said?
No. Historically, it was like a 2.5%, 3% cap that based on your evaluation. To try to be a little more competitive and fair to the employees, we split that 5% based on what the COLA is. If the COLA is, and we used to use the minimum wage increase as the COLA. So if the COLA it was going to be 2%, everybody got a 2% bump in pay, and then based on your evaluation, you were eligible to get a 3% additional increase. If you were like a top performer, you got 5% increase that year. If you were a marginal performer, you might get 3.5% or 3%. It was a way of helping the managers give better, more accurate feedback to the employees. Because, every manager, including myself, we're people, we work closely with our staff, and you want to be honest with people, but you don't want to just tell somebody you're not getting a raise this year because you had a bad year.
But some people could be getting a 5% raise then?
That's the
I mean,
maximum.
again, 5% is quite a hefty raise, at least from what I was used to. But they could get a 5% raise.
Correct. Okay. And it goes back to the compensation packet of
Right.
Do you want to be a training ground or do you want to try to retain people? And those
then-
are decisions the board needs to make.
With that, then, so if you go to D2, again, just understand this again, we have employee incentive, and it went from 2021 of $5,465 to $89,620 for 2022. I don't understand that.
Okay. Instead of trying to determine a ballpark of what each sub-department would get for their employee incentive, we put all the employee incentive in the finance department budget. And then once the employees get their evaluations, we do a budget transfer that moves that money throughout the department. So each year, if you go back and look at the FY21 budget, you'll see a number in, I think, the 60 or 70,000 range, and then that money's transferred out. So what you're seeing there is what's left over from the raises. The raises, the year-end estimate, that's any money spent on like the gift cards that we give out around Christmas, any Christmas party expense, and the raises for the finance department. So every year you have that illusion that that's growing, that's a big jump.
But, so again, though, that 89,620 are the raises we just talked about, the 2 to 5%?
That's
Or that's in addition to that? I don't mean to
no.
stay on this, I'm just confused on it.
If you go to page D8, what you're looking at is the department roll-up page there. If you go to page D8, it breaks it out specifically. The 89,000 is 3,500 for flu shots, 1,400 for gift cards. I'm sorry, I'm reading that backwards. $500 flu shots, 3,500 gift cards, 1,440 for the Christmas party, and 84,000 for the
I gotcha.
employee raises.
Yep,
Now,
I gotcha.
part of the reason it's higher this year is we were giving the raises out in late December, which was a 9-month expense. But to match up with the minimum wage increase October 1 going forward, we have to give 12-month raises.
Okay, I got you. Yep, thank you for that. I just didn't understand it. Remember, folks, jump in here. I don't want to monopolize this. I have questions, Kathy. I think I asked you this before, but I'm not. I'm in the mode again of looking at some things in the budget that I'm not in favor of increasing either prices of or employees or salaries or the amount we're spending for certain things, and then still looking at raising things like food prices, et cetera, et cetera. So the first question, I guess, is we're raising our drink and food prices. Maybe this is to John, to you, not to Kathy. We're raising our food and drink prices because we think we are short revenues. I mean, I know we're only bringing in $49,000, so we're saying, okay, because of that, we're going to raise the food and beverage prices. Does that sound right?
Historically, the board has been very conscious of the subsidy required for food and beverage. In FY20, they moved entertainment out,
Right.
which shows a lower. We are happy to do whatever you want. If you don't, with the next 6 years of $1, more than $1 this year, and then 5 years of $1 a year increase for your wait staff in food and beverage. If you don't raise your prices, you're going to have to heavily subsidize operations. If you want to cut the prices at food and beverage in half, we'll be more than happy to run a $500,000 subsidy. It's however you want to pay the expense.
Well, here's, and I'll just throw this out so we, because I guess I'm not going to go through all of these. Here's what I'm looking at. I'm not in favor of certain things. I'm looking at, I'm not saying I'm not going to vote for this, I'm not for it. I'm just saying right now I'm not in favor of certain things. Number one, I'm not in favor of the loan. I will tell you that right now. I'm not in favor of that loan coming at this time and paying out $170,000 a year when we're looking at the next two things, the next year, this year and the next year. I'm not in favor of raising drink prices when, and again, I've talked to John about this before, I don't believe the analyst position should be funded. I don't believe we should be doing that when we're starting, when we're looking at revenues being only $49,000 a year and putting another position on. I know we need that, but I'm not in favor of doing that. I'm not in favor of what we are paying currently for legal fees. We're spending over $150,000 a year on legal fees, and I've gone through every single line item and every budget I can find about this, and I think when we're spending $150, another $66 for there, going for loans, but then saying we have to raise prices on food and drinks, I think we're going at it the wrong way. We're not in a deficit budget, but I still think we have to look at things and say before we start raising something as simple as food prices or drink prices, we have to discuss this and say, are there some ways that we could cut some things or adjust some things? I'm not saying we don't need our attorney and that the things that they do, but I think some of this stuff is just getting a little bit out of hand. So I'm also, the last one I have is I've never been in favor of opening up that 19th hole early in the morning in June and July when you only have a couple of people coming there in the morning. I just think that that's something that many golf courses do not do. They don't open even their bars until 11 and 12 at noon or noontime. So I throw that out there. I'm not against the budget. I'm not against things. I just have concerns about these, and if none of you do, that's okay, but I just wanted to make my concerns known. So I've monopolized enough. I'm sorry.
I have to agree with you, Mike. I think we have to look at doing business in a different way. I agree that we probably don't need to open the 19th hole for breakfast. Go over to the RJ's. One of the other things is I'm not sure we need to keep the 19th hole open at night, late, especially in the summer when nobody really likes to golf.
Yeah, I'm talking about the summer when there are very few people using it in the morning. You know.
And I think there should...
And I'm not saying we don't close that, remember. I'm just simply saying those are things I think we have to look at.
Well, I think we should take a look at peak load staffing and take a look at what can be done effectively with what we've got. I don't think we need to staff in the summer as strict as we staff in the winter. I think those are where we're going to have to look to get some of our economies.
Well, I'm in agreement with no loan. I don't like the idea of a loan. If we have to, then we may have to bite that bullet and go for it. What I'm not in agreement on is if you look at, we do have to do something with renovation of that lounge area. Not necessarily the lounge itself, but that outside area. A better way to serve the customers that go there. If you look at Saturday and Sunday of this week, and this is just after COVID, that thing was slammed. Nobody could get a seat. Nobody could get a chair. Nobody could get a table. We didn't have enough tables. We didn't have enough chairs. We don't have enough service out there. Our service could improve if we had the staff that could even wait tables outside, but they don't. So everybody so if you're 60, 70, or my husband Richard, who's in a walker all the time, if he wanted a drink, somebody had to go get that drink for him, which put about 7 to 8 to 10 people deep in the bar of a bar that's only efficient for 2 bartenders, and we're trying to run 4 or 5 bartenders out of it. So we're stepping on our own toes by not making some of the improvements that we do need, that we've got to have.
I think they had a bar outside, though, the whole time, didn't they? They had a bar outside in the corner.
They
didn't
did, and they did, and we had Laura outside. I mean, Laura was probably serving 10 to every 5 that were being served inside. She's just that good, but not every bartender is a Laura. Not every bartender has that skill set. So that really is a matter of skill that she was handling. And the work, my God, the woman worked like an ox setting that bar up. I mean, she was hefting heavy things of ice and beer, and she was a workhorse. She's who I would want on a survival island if I was out there by myself, for sure. So I don't think, we don't make it easy on staff. I don't think we make it easy on the service line. We've got to do something there. We have to look at it. I don't think that we can ignore it. I think something there has to be done. We've got a huge demand, and we're not talking a few hundred. We're talking thousands that have a demand for the entertainment and a demand to come there and a demand to be a part of that. So I think we do have to address it. I don't know that we want to address it the way that we originally looked at it 3 years ago or 4 years ago, but it does have to be addressed. As far as staff, I think we're getting on a slippery slope when we look at what can we do to work our efficiencies. I think that we can ask our managers to look at their efficiencies and see if we can't improve them, but be prepared to stand behind them and help them when they come back to us and say, I can improve it if I have this, this, and this. If they don't have the resources to improve their staff, or they don't have the working conditions for their staff to be efficient, then we've got to be prepared as a board to step forward and say we will provide that. We're on a slippery slope, and I think we're sending a sketchy message to the community by even looking loudly at that. I think that if we want to look at our staffing situation, let's ask our managers to provide us with some proficiency information.
But I'm not sure, I didn't mention anything about staffing. I wasn't talking about
No,
staffing.
no, I was referring to Jeff. You know, Jeff had mentioned,
Oh.
you know, it might be an area that we need to look at. And it might, but I think it would be the last thing that I'd want to look at.
And I just want to make sure it's clear, and I know John knows this. The only reason I'm opposed to the analyst position is because of the way we did that and where it's contained. That's the only thing I have with that, so.
Well, that position, Mike, was a 4-year position, a 4-year hashed out, different board member. And, you know, every board member is going to have a different opinion on it.
I
You know, it's
understand.
not, it's not a
I
hill
didn't
on.
like the way we did it by putting it in the contract and stuff. That's the thing. That's the only thing I don't like.
Okay. Yeah, it's not a hill I'm going to die on. But, you know, if it comes in, it comes in. If it doesn't, it doesn't. There's, you know, but I think decisions, we're living with decisions that were made before us, and the decisions that we make, people are going to have to live with after us. So I think that we just, when we're looking at this budget, let's be responsible with it. But let's not cut off our nose to spite our face at this point in the game. It's not, you know, we should not, and I would highly advise us not to do that.
The question goes back again, and guys, jump in. I mean, the question goes back again then. These were just simple ideas. The question goes back to saying, and maybe we do we want to say that we will increase prices on things? And this is just it's not the food and beverage that's the problem. Do we say we want to increase prices on things, increase price on drinks, increase price on food and beverage, I think we're doing a $50 increase on new homeowners, and that, again, just affects new homeowners. Do we want to do that, or do we want to say, are there places that, let's assume that this budget said, well, we are down $200,000, so we got to try to make that up. I'm just throwing that number out. It may not be a number. Do we say we want to raise prices to make that up, or do we say we want to look at some things in the budget that possibly we could cut to not have to do that? That's the question I'm simply trying to propose. It's not the specifics even. I only use the food and beverage because those are the things that had the percentage increases there. That's my question.
That's a valid question, Mike, and I think it's a good question, and I think that is the two-way street that we should be traveling. We should be looking upstream and downstream. We should be looking at where can we make cuts that are valid cuts, that are good, healthy cuts to our budget, get rid of the dead wood, where can we raise our prices to be in line with what we need to do to maintain operations. I think Kathy and John have done a very good job at ferreting out what those prices need to be with what market value in the area is. And yeah, I mean, we could outprice ourselves, I suppose, and people would stop coming, but I hear people complain about the prices when they raise, but I see them still coming and paying.
Sure. And Kathy, going with the prices of things, what are the prices right now? Let's say a well drink in the lounge or wherever they would buy a drink. What is the price of a drink?
$4.50.
$4.50, and that's in line with everywhere else.
I think that's less.
That's less
than
than
most
everywhere
places,
else?
except clubs when you're talking about, you know, the Moose and places who use volunteers.
Okay, so we're talking about a drink $4.50. We're talking $4.75. What would a drink go up to? $4?
Or 20. A $5 drink could go up 35 cents.
Okay. So again, I'm not after your increases. Don't get me wrong. I just use that as the example, trying to get the point out of whether we
I think
cut
what you
or-
both said is very interesting because I can appreciate what you're saying. People who are coming, who are coming to these big events or music bingo or karaoke, who love the events, and there's lots of people. why aren't there more servers? Why can't you come out? They don't want to walk, or maybe some can't, and,
Sure.
and I can understand that. But, there's a higher level of service that people are expecting when they see great music and the environment that we have and the grounds that we have, the food and the drinks. And I have drink specials all of these weekends, and people, especially in season, love that. So their expectation increases. To provide that, it's more money.
Yeah.
It's more labor. And I think that's what we're trying to achieve, is we want to provide all those services. We want to do it well. And there, as the bar lifts, we're trying to do that. But at some point, to be able to do that, there's got to be a way to cover those costs, whether it's subsidized or an increase in price.
Without going back and finding the page in here, John, I remember before we moved entertainment and music and everything over to, I believe we moved to Matt, right? Over here, yeah. And we used to talk about the golf course. We put so much into the general fund of the golf course, so much into food and beverage. And I think I remember a figure of like 40, 50,000 or something we were putting into food and beverage. Right now, if we look at this budget coming up for fiscal year 22, based on revenues and expenditures in food and beverage, without me trying to find that page, are we subsidizing it by an amount? What is that amount?
The budget is a subsidy of $39,000.
39?
That
Okay.
doesn't include $108,000 in entertainment that's
Yeah,
in
yeah,
property
right.
services.
But I mean, 39,000 is minimal. It's just a small amount, so.
I guess what I was trying to get at is, I know we used to have karaoke at the 19th hole in the evening. Well, when we get into the summer months, can we afford to have karaoke at the 19th hole in the evening? Or is that a selective downsizing that we do? Maybe in the fall and the winter when everybody's down here, it could support itself. But I think we just need to take a look at some of those areas that we haven't taken a look at. I'm not saying cut our nose to spite our face, but I think we just have to look at some other avenues.
Well, one thing as treasurer that I have done is I've looked at high event nights like that. I mean, before we came to budget, I wanted to make sure I had that kind of under my belt. And so for about 3 years, I've looked at those things. I've worked with Kathy on several events, so I know how the event has brought in money. I know what we've spent on events, such as Barefoot by the Lake. One of the things that I looked at, our revenues were equal to, if we had a karaoke or if we had a Steve Cole or an entertainment at the 19th hole, there's not an empty seat in there. And if you look at the bar revenue for that night, am I right, Kathy? It goes way up. Food goes way up because that was really our venue for food. I think Kathy's looking at a different way to serve food and entertainment with the new kitchen and everything going in. And I look forward to hearing more about that. I think that we probably will see less entertainment at the 19th hole. I don't know. And perhaps more centralized down around Building A, where we can accommodate more people. Because if the 19th hole were bigger, I guarantee you the last season that we had that was an open season there, it would have filled. Whether it was 100 people or whether it was 50 people, it would have filled.
That's all I'm asking for.
I think that the budget for food and beverage that we've developed is a shift from the 19th hole without 19th hole is the perfect spot to come for lunch and drinks, and we've got accessible parking. It's got a Cheers-like atmosphere, and golfers and the neighborhood loves the 19th hole. This budget was shifting because it tends to be overcrowded whenever we have a Steve Cole or karaoke. It generates sales, it generates people, it gets crowded. Then there's this conflict between the golfers. With pasta night, we have a new kitchen. We've got beautiful grounds. We've got a lakeside environment, and so we really wanted to shift a lot of the entertainment and dining options to the Building A complex and the Pavilion and the lakeside and the lounge and pool area. The commercial kitchen will not be able to handle all of the food options for the pool and the lounge and lakeside, but because we just won't have it all the time. And catering is done out of there as well. But as much as we can, we wanted to shift a lot of, the entertainment to that area. So the elimination of pasta night, combining that with the Thursday night themed event in Building A, having one night a month at the 19th hole, whether that's outside or inside, similar to the bourbon party that we did. We used to have pasta night outside. Between the heat and love bugs, you tend to have some problems outside there as well. But, so we can have some events there, but primarily try to shift everything down to the Building A complex.
Kathy, I have a question. I look at your revenue and expense summary by day for both the 19th and the lounge, and I have yet to see a day that either of those places have lost money. To that end, does that mean we will still have to supplement food and beverage going forward?
The recaps do not include administration salary, and my department, my salary, office staff, a lot of maintenance that doesn't include all of the expenses. And this is the best time of year, so you're going to see a profit January, February, and March in both places. But it doesn't include all the expenses. It's just a recap of sales, food costs, beverage costs, and labor.
And a broader picture of that, the February revenue expenditure report Charles Henley just put out for the department as a whole for the month, she was less than 1,000 to the positive. So while those recaps show direct costs on a daily basis, we basically broke even for the month.
Do you think we're maybe still because of COVID, even though the 19th hole is open, I'm only by the 19th hole on a Monday or on a Friday with the golf group I play with. But 20 or 30 of those people are all outside in their carts. And I'm not even sure. I've only been in the lounge once, I think, since we've opened after COVID. Are we seeing a reduction in the amount of money we're bringing in because people are not going in right now, do you think? Or are they coming in?
No, sales are way down.
They're way down.
Because of
Yeah.
COVID. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, even the people are sitting out on their carts right there, but they're not coming in. I know some go in and get a bucket of beers, et cetera. We have a waitress comes outside, and everything, but they are way down, right?
They are way down, and if you were at the event on Sunday, while there were many people inside, there had to be 100 golf carts in the field.
Oh.
So people still aren't willing to, come on in,
sure,
and it's the
sure.
same at the 19th hole.
Sure.
And I have no problem with subsidizing until we get over the hump here. But somewhere I think we want to slowly get to break even.
And I have no problem with subsidizing any of the amenities that we have. That's not at all my concern of subsidizing it. I have no problem subsidizing food and beverage. I have no problem subsidizing the golf course, and we subsidize the pools for $400,000. I mean, that's what we do. That's what we're here to do. John, one other question I have, and you may have answered this for me before, but as I look at our funded projects for fiscal year 22, the $56,500 for a beach project pavilion, can you explain to me again what that is? I think you did once before to me.
That's been in the 5-year plan for several years. It's basically as it is described, it's a 20 by 40 pavilion on a concrete slab with benches and tables.
At the beach?
At the beach.
At the beach, okay.
That might be something we have to take a look at, especially if we would have to put pilings in. That would make that extremely cost prohibitive.
That's never been a funded project, though, has it, John?
It is funded, though, in the fiscal year 22. Well, it's in the fiscal year 22 capital project plan. Isn't that right, John?
Yes. As I detailed in the budget, the only thing I changed from the 22 with all the uncertainty going forward was to have a positive fund balance and a little money left over that possibly could be used to address compression down the road. Is I took out the high-ticket items of paving, parking lots, and green replacements, and everything else I just rolled forward a year as planned from last year.
And if you look at, again, I'm looking at the 5-year plan here, F13. If you use a fund balance rolling forward, the lounge, lakes, and expansion, building a retaining wall, replacement concrete, okay, replacement of pit building at Pool 1, relocation heater equipment at Pool 1. If the lounge project for that $1 million loan or whatever is not going through, are those still things that happen, or is that part of that? The pit and the heater.
The pit is in a possibility of an imminent collapse for the last year or so. If that collapses, the pool will be probably shut down for 6 to 9 months. The heater relocation is more of an aesthetic, trying to open up spaces that people can use to watch bands and stuff.
So that does not depend on whether or not we were going to do that lounge expansion that we were talking about.
Correct.
These could happen without that.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Well, that was a lot for nothing. What what would you like from us now? Questions on anything? Again, I think you guys just do an excellent job on this budget. There's so much detail here, probably more than I can understand, and thus the questions. But I think you do an excellent job. I'm not in any way against the budget, but I just have some concerns, that's all.
John, can I ask you a question? And that is there a way to highlight in the capital projects going forward which you would consider and your staff would consider high priority items that need to be addressed?
That's probably the majority of items still funded. Anything that is described as being recognized by the facility duty assessment needing to be replaced or repaired would fit that category. If you're talking about the FY22 budget, you know, a lot of that, like the tennis court resurfacing, it's a question of what's important to the community that staff can't really answer, because Mr. Getz and I, we hear from the tennis players who that one tear is just, you know, bothers them every day they show up to play tennis. It's not cheap to replace because the product we got 7 years ago, the vendor has been very unresponsive of coming down to do repairs, and it's to the point he doesn't want to repair the tear anymore. He just wants to put all new surface on at, you know, $50,000, $70,000, and based on his track record of not being willing to come down to address maintenance except a couple months in the winter time, you know, Mr. Getz and I would prefer to go back to a traditional approach, but they can play tennis on it for the next several years. It's just not ideal, and that's where the difficult decisions is. Chairman Mino talks about how competitive do you want to be in the marketplace with your employees. That's another decision that only the board can make. You know, the challenge of this community is how much turnover you want in your staff over the next 6 years. You're going to have turnover in your staff. There's not enough money to take care of the staff you have. So that's take care of paying them a market rate that they won't be lured away. An example, our DOR officer, if she left for Palm Bay or Melbourne, she could pick up $5, $6 an hour. She lives in the community, and she chooses to work in the community she lives. But as those cities address the compression in their pay plans, at some point, whether it's $9, $10, $12 an hour increase, she's going to bolt up there for a job, and then we'll be hiring her replacement. So there's staff has given you our proposal for the budget. Any changes you want to make, we'll gladly make them. And my suggestion to take a formal consensus on the lounge project, because that is the biggest elephant in the room, that then we can show you the impact of that, and you can make specific decisions after that.
And John, just, make sure you understand two things. One, the kinds of things you're talking about, tennis courts and replacement, or repaving or whatever, those are the kinds of things that I have absolutely no problem with us doing, because I think those affect people immediately. Those are the kind of things that they see and they like. I mentioned one time the people talked about the pool table and had tears in it or something, and I don't really know. I've never been in there. But those are the kind of things they see and say, oh, yeah, it only cost us a couple $1,000s to do that, but it made a big impact on certain people. Resurfacing the tennis courts would make a big impact on people. It's something they see right away. I have no problem with any of those things there. Most of it was just trying to understand it. Same thing with our staff. I in no way think that we should be doing anything to not encourage our staff to stay. And my questions earlier had to do with some things I didn't understand, if the two things were different and or if they were part of the same thing. If they were different, I would have had a problem with that. So again, I agree with you. I think we have to come to some kind of consensus, number one, on the lounge and the $1 million loan, let's call it, I guess. What is the feeling? We're not here to make motions, but what is the feeling of this board? Jim?
I'll start by saying I'm not in favor of it due to the financial situation. Not at this time.
Mr. Morrissey? Comments, questions?
Well, being a new member of the board, and this is my first go-around with a budget, I understand that Mr. Coffey and staff presents their expertise as far as the budget. I personally don't know anything about budgets, okay, so they got me at a disadvantage. But what I see here is they are proposing a budget that we probably could live with, okay? To nitpick and go down with things to save a couple of $1,000s, I don't know the whole idea of this, because their experience, their experience in financial matters and budgets is well beyond my comprehension.
Well, the question, though, is we're talking about we either go for $1 million loan,
Yeah.
or we don't go for $1 million loan to expand the lounge and do irrigation.
Everybody here tonight, excuse
What's
me,
that?
but everybody here tonight is not for a loan, actually, right? As far as I'm hearing, nobody wants to have a loan. The only way you're going to have all the things that you want is a loan, okay?
Just the lounge and the irrigation system, those
Yeah,
two things
yeah.
we're talking.
Well, I'm just saying in general, okay? Because I've been here for a few years and I see the budget. They keep on pushing off things that, could be fixed. If you just took one or two items, a year. When you overwhelm the budget with all these different things that have to be, the wish list, more or less, it gets more difficult, especially in times like this. Now, as far as the loan is concerned, I see that the only way you're going to get ahead is going to cost you money, and that's a loan. I'm not in favor of it, but that's my opinion.
Yeah. But just so you understand, and I know you are not on the board, and I apologize for that, this loan is specifically to enlarge the outside. It was a plan developed to redo the whole outside of the lounge with drop-down walls, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was a plan proposed at the previous board, and in order to do that, we had to get $1 million loan to do that. It wasn't repairing anything. It was to build that new thing as an addition to the lounge.
But why is there a new? The new roof is a repair, isn't it?
No. This loan is strictly
That
for
was
this
sale.
new
I see. Okay.
addition to the lounge.
Okay.
That's what it's for.
Okay.
Mr. Gruno.
As I said a little bit earlier tonight, I do have some concerns with the change in administration in Washington. I think there's going to be some unintended consequences coming out of, should I say, a different lean of the government. On the other hand, money is cheap now. And if you're going to borrow, now is the time to borrow. And sooner or later, we're going to have to bite the bullet on the lounge. It's one of our most popular areas. Saturday and Sunday, that place was just crawling with people. And I would say that we could probably judiciously handle a $170,000 debt service and get that lounge and the irrigation done. I don't think we want to wait around for the irrigation to fail on the golf course, and now we got a huge problem. So I, for one, think we could swing the $170,000 debt service for the loan, do the lounge, do the irrigation.
Mr. Loveland.
Well, I'm in agreement with Mr. Grunow. I'm not happy about having to take out a loan, but can we handle it? I believe that we can. And I do believe that we need to get that lounge modified to where it is a serviceable area for music venue, and for a food venue. And, that the area has grown. Its needs have changed over the last 50 years. And it's as valuable as the golf course. So, it's hard to say. I mean, you got 400 golfers and you got 4,000 people using the lounge. They're both necessary.
Okay. Again, I'm not in favor of the loan. I don't believe we can manage $170,000 in new expenditures for this loan, especially with the way we're looking at the next 2 years with the increase in minimum wages, et cetera. So this really solved, and again, the irrigation system is to replace pipes in there. We don't have the pipes blown up. They're not broke. This was just a plan to go and do it all at one time. So it's not like these things are leaking or falling apart at all. They're not, just so we understand that. We did replace the heads, we replaced the boxes out there. So we're in fine shape. But again, that's just me. So we don't have a consensus, I don't believe.
That would be a judgment of the board. Prior boards sometimes have had a 3-2 consensus.
Well, I guess I'm not in favor of the loan. Mr. Nugent's not in favor of the loan. Mr. Grunow and Mr. Loveland are in favor of the loan. Mr. Morse, are you in favor of the loan or not?
No.
Is not in favor. So it is a consensus. Thank you. I was not trying to put words in anybody's mouth, so I just want to make sure we were clear. Now, let me add one thing that is bad about this, and this is what I talked about and Mr. Grunow talked about before. If we had a 7-member board right now with 3-year terms, everybody, that could not have happened just now. Because you would not have been able to overturn things of previous boards. Just so you understand. So, where do we go now?
Wherever y'all would like to go. I would just make a suggestion, because I know you've spoken about it tonight in prior meetings, maybe inquire of the feeling of the rest of the board about the management analyst position. Just for folks who may be new to us,
Sure.
The board renewed the SDS contract that provides for me, my position, and in it, you have the ability to say yes or no to funding the management analyst position when it's vacant. There's an out clause that you can tell SDS to go away in 60 days like all our other contracts. So the position currently is vacant, and if I understand the chairman's position, he would like to get a consensus of the board to officially notify SDS that you're not interested in filling the position going forward for an indefinite period.
And I appreciate that, John. Yes. And again, when this happened in October, and this position was put into the management of the SDS contract, and by the way, I have a whole article coming out in the Tatler explaining what SDS does, how we're in favor of them. They do a great job. They don't run the bay. They do exactly what we want them to do. At the time, putting this position in there, and at the time this was voted on in the contract prior to the election. I was totally against this, and Mr. Coffey knew that, and I voiced that opinion to the board, and the trustees then voted it in, and it's in that contract for 5 years. We extended that contract from 3 years to 5 years. I was totally against that. I am not against the analyst position. I'm not against that at all. I'm against the way the analyst position is in that contract, which I thought was not necessary, and I would not vote to have that position filled because of that. That's the only thing I'm against. I'm not against the fact that Mr. Coffey probably needs that help. I'm against the way that happened, and that I didn't think it was proper that it had to be in the contract. So again, it's a funded position in the fiscal year 21 budget for about $31,000, and it's a funded position in the 22 budget for $66,000 or something like that. And so I guess this board, if they feel that's something that should go ahead, this would be the time to let Mr. Coffey know that. I'm not in favor of it. I'm not in favor of adding that position at this time.
What exactly does the management analyst do or management assistant do?
The concept of it, larger organizations, each department manager would have some support staff. Mr. Hinley has the best support staff in the Bay. On paper, Mr. Getz and Ms. Mendes have support staff, but they're working support staff. So largely, and I'm loath to try to toot my own horn, but probably 90% of the budget document you have in front of you is my production. And when there's been special reports like the facilities study, the principles of operation, emergency management plan, special requests, it largely comes through on my shoulders. I'm fine with that, but long term, I don't think that's a sustainable practice for the community to rely upon having a community manager who does the peak of the week every Sunday at home. The management analyst would get the best of both worlds. Ideally, you hire a person out of graduate school or with a bachelor's degree who wants to be a community manager, city manager one day, has an education but very little experience. Those people are willing to work themselves to death to pad their resume to move up the food chain in life. Those are the type of people who can do a lot of work that waits on me to have time to do it now. My managers, they're quality people. The team I have is the best team of individuals I could ask to work with. With that said, I want Mr. Getz focused on getting the work in the field done. I don't want Mr. Getz trying to be the perfect wordsmith on reports. And that's how Ms. Mendes and I got to the principles of operations years ago. I did the data crunching over the summer, and we would sit down and review it and talk about it, and then I would take a stab at writing the narrative and the recommendations. The other two weaknesses our organization currently has right now is a large segment of our community likes Facebook, and we don't have the ability to properly operate an official Facebook page. And the reason I say properly is if Mr. Smith has a Facebook site and somebody puts something on there that offends him, he can delete that post. In government, that's a public record. You can remove it, but you have to be able to save it because it's a public document. There's third-party software that enables that. There's also a well-established concept, if you're not posting to Facebook multiple times a day, don't have a Facebook page because it becomes stale. The third item that we are woefully underperforming is we rely on our clubs and organizations like the Horseshoe Club, the Softball Association, the tennis players. They come and tell us when something needs to be done at their amenities. We should really be more proactive in having a person stop by and see how things are going. Is there anything we can do to help the amenity? We just don't have that ability. Mr. Getz's folks They're the unsung firefighters of facility maintenance because they go from one urgent issue to the next urgent issue, sometimes get pulled off like miniature golf and do something that's urgent, and then they go back and work on miniature golf. So that was the concept, that it was a person who would help all the managers on a high-level administrative professional support, expand our communication, expand our liaison with clubs and organizations, and be a little relief valve to your manager's workload. You know, if anybody is really interested, go back 8 years and look at your agenda packets. Mr. Henley's real good at doing budget amendments, and he does the treasurer's report. Stephanie does the minutes, and virtually everything else in the agenda packet comes through my office, comes through my keyboards. If I had that type of all my eggs in one basket, I would not sleep well at night if I was in this community or a trustee, because if I'm tired and the train takes me out, I'm largely starting from scratch in this organization. And I'm not trying to make myself sound indispensable, but I look at each of my departments as what is the weakness. One of the glaring weaknesses has always been resident relations, a full-time backup administrative person. The board last year moved some budgets around to where Mr. Armington can now have a full-time HR office assistant. Prior to that, the district clerk was, you know, she was the chief bottle washer, cook, and everything, and she had a part-time receptionist as backup. We have a full-time person there. Miss Mendes is the weakest link of if she just hits the lottery, we're in deep trouble as far as that department, because no one truly appreciates what she does except me, because she works more hours than I do consistently, and she's here more than I am. But those are your weaknesses, and a management analyst is a person who ideally is younger and willing to work those hours, because in my profession, when I get out of graduate school, I have 6 years of education, a lot of student debt, and no experience. But the experience comes with working, more experience comes better jobs, and then you end up in Barefoot Bay working with wonderful staff and wonderful trustees.
Yeah, I guess so. Was it ever, yeah.
I'm all for it.
He said that was political.
Well, I
And
think
again,
John-
go ahead, comment, question?
I'll add one thing to this analyst, and then I will never speak at this position again. We've worked for probably 6 years that I know of to try to find a role within this community. One of the reasons for that is 6 years ago we didn't know what our percentage of homeowners that were here, weren't here. It was all hearsay. Until we did a census. This person, if we had a person like that was here, we could have had that done. I've had to, before I came to the board meeting, to be prepared for, before I came to this workshop, to be prepared to understand what our revenues look like on peak nights and non-peak nights. I had to pull that information from my own treasury reports or from my own reports from Charles to see what that was. And it was a little bit of an arduous job to do for a volunteer. I put a lot of hours into it. I could have called John. He would have had somebody do that. I had a question recently, 2 questions, on some legal cost, and Stephanie has had to go and do the research and is still doing research on one of the questions, which is valuable. It's valuable information for me to bring to a board member to share with you so that we make decisions that are based on answers and based on facts. And there are more questions within our community than there are answers. And this person could go in and get those answers. It's just a matter of looking at historical data or looking at data or going and having a conversation with. So I've been for this position because I know every manager cannot do it. I've seen Kathy at work. I've seen Matt at work. They're chasing 62 different gophers down 400 different holes. It's just, it's kind of an impossible thing for them. And so I have been for this position. Again, this is the last I'll speak on it. And that's all I have to say.
Mr. Gruno.
I don't think John asked for too much, and I think we have a really good management team here. And if the management analyst would give us backup, it's always good to have a bench to go to. Do I want to spend that kind of money? Probably not. But I think that you do need to have some reserves in place. And if this is a person that could be a jack of all hitters, I think it's a good idea. Thanks.
Mr. Morrissey.
I ditto that. I think it's a good idea to have some a relief for John. He'll probably be a good fit and come up with some relief for the residents when their questions and be answered in a proper timeline. So yeah, I'm for it.
Mr. Nugent.
Yeah, I mean, thinking about it, I am basically will be in favor of it.
Okay. You have your consensus, sir?
I see this as an investment, and that's a word you're going to hear out of me numerous times. I think we're investing in our management team, we're investing in our community manager, and I think we're investing in the board as we'll have a venue to get some needed information.
Again, is the last word. Remember, the investment is good. It's the point that we put it into the SDS contract that I object to strongly. Okay, you have your consensus. It's a funded position. What else do we need? Oh, I did bring this up, and again, talk about an elephant in the room. I do think we have to sit down in some way and look at how we are dealing with legal fees. I really, truly, I've talked about this before. I haven't seen anything like this. I mean, the amount of money we're spending on legal fees not that we're not getting good professional advice, but that's what legal is for advice on certain things that come up. And the amount of money we're spending right now, I think, is just out of line. And I think you mentioned one time previous boards had come up with some type of I forget what it is you told me they had looked at about what you do with legal, and it wasn't really followed through or something.
Well, one of the things that, and I'm just folding out a couple pages to get some clarity, we're projecting legal expenses to be in the combined district-wide about $111,000 this year. Part of what drives that compared to other communities is, Brevard County, City of Palm Bay, their code enforcement system goes to a code enforcement board that fines people. Our DOR the state doesn't allow special districts to fine for DOR violations, so we end up suing people. That's part of the hidden cost, and that's why a few years prior, we broke out and put in like resident relations. Let me go to the roll-up page for you to show legal fees of that 110,000. About 40,000 of that is DOR related, and when we used to have it all buried in the district clerk's office, yeah, it made the district clerk look like she had a big budget, but part of it was the management fee, part of it was the legal fees. To work that number down is going to take some strategies, I think, with Mr. Reppinger, because while the majority of homeowners rarely get a DOR letter, or if they get it, they quickly come into voluntary compliance, there is a slight growing amount of people moving into Barefoot Bay. They don't have a clue what they're moving into. They're moving here because it's an inexpensive place to buy an older home. They're not interested in amenities. They park on the grass. They leave their boats sitting in the driveway and tell us, go pound sand. And So I think at some point, we're going to plateau, and you're going to have that hardcore group of folks that, however unpopular maybe the decision is, that you got to tolerate a certain level of bad behavior because you don't want to pay for it. That's a discussion for long term. But if you would like, this is sort of self-defeating. I could invite Mr. Reppinger to the next budget workshop. You could engage him on this discussion. However, you got to pay him to come to it. So it's sort of defeating to that.
And that's exactly the point. And I'm not against Mr. Reppinger and what he does for us. However, I look at every single, as I hope you people do, look at every single line item, every single charge that comes every single month. And it's $12,000 to $14,000. And it is every single email, every phone call. It's going back on emails. It's going back on phone calls. And every single time, I made a joke a while ago that every time that phone picked up, it starts the timer going. And you look at the amount of resolutions can be made and read by anyone. You don't have to have an attorney read a resolution. All you have to do is have the attorney prepare it. All I'm saying is that it's not just in DOR. There are so many things that we use our attorney for. It's not his fault. It has nothing to do with him. So many things we use our attorney for that it's just getting, it looks to me like it's just every time anything comes up, we call the attorney and say, what do you think about this? I don't know that. I hate to say it that way, John. I'm not knocking anyone. All I'm saying is I look at those bills every month of $12,000 to $14,000, and I just think, my goodness, what are we getting for this? It's a lot of money we're paying for legal fees.
Oh, I can relate a public records request. Public records come to Ms. Brown because she's the custodian, and I had a public records request that was very vague. It came with a petition of 30 people, about 30 homeowners' names and addresses, but the requester wanted to remain anonymous. I responded quickly with our protocol of trying to seek clarification to minimize the cost of the person, and they came back with accusations of we were trying to deny them public records, and it's very simple, just give me what we want. I felt compelled to safeguard the district to refer that to Mr. Reppinger. And after 2 back and forths, we've had code silence from them for a little bit. But sometimes when you work in an environment that's heavily second-guessed, it tends to encourage staff to check with legal counsel first because
I understand that. Yeah.
of the environment you're in.
I do. Again, just one of my concerns. I hope I didn't come off as the negative Nelly here tonight, but there are just things I have concerns about and look at, and I'm used to dealing with budgets all my life and legal things like this, and I probably look at it from a different perspective, and I don't mean to be negative about any of this.
Well, I have to agree with you, Mike. I looked at that the first time I got a budget, and it just floored me. And then when you go back and look at the small things you're charged for, like email, and I know that's how they bill, but I agree with you. Maybe we need to take a look at another.
Just as how we use legal
Yeah.
and make sure that everybody's on the same page saying, yeah, we'll try to be as conservative as possible. That's all I'm looking for.
Well, I think one of the ways that we do need to look at legal, and I am looking at that right now, is what is it costing us to get the simple lease contracts executed? Because if it takes our attorney $10,000 to execute a contract in billable time, then we probably need to look at why that is. Because a lease should be a pretty straightforward, let's get it done, a lease or a contract for roof repair that we're still waiting on. There are some things that I would like to see to take a closer look at, and I'll do that. As the treasurer of this group, I will do that. Take a look at some of those billable times and see if it's and bring that to you, and you guys can decide if that's something that was overboard or not.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I really question the necessity of having Cliff here at every single board meeting. I come from an environment where if you had in fact a legal question, you would table the discussion until it could be referred to the attorney and come up with a plausible answer, and that be brought back to the next board meeting.
Right, I agree, yeah. I'm used to that also, where you would, if you needed advice, legal advice, you would postpone it, table it, do whatever, and get your legal advice. And again, that's, maybe that's just the way these types of organizations work. John would know that better than I do, but I'm just not used to it, and so I guess I question it also.
I can see where, Jim, I can see where you're coming from on that. However, I have seen more than 10 occasions over the past 6 years where Cliff literally saved the board from misstepping during a meeting, which is why he's there, to go, oh, you guys, you can't do that, or you can't make that a motion at this point. So I have seen several times where he has stepped in and intervened to keep us from making a wrong turn. A parliamentarian could probably do the same thing, but right now we have Cliff, and with everybody being new on the board, and then at the end of this year, two more people are either going to be new unless Jeff and Mike run again, and then at the end of my term, there's going to be 3 people new. So there's always going to be somebody new here, just learning the ropes on how a meeting runs, how an official government meeting runs, because that's what these are. And, so he is a little bit of a safety net in having him here.
I would have to agree with the safety net. One of the things that I like about Cliff is he seems to be the corporate knowledge of 13 years here. And he'll go back and tell me stuff that I would have no chance of ever knowing. So I think in that respect, the corporate knowledge that he has with the Barefoot Bay is a good thing. But again, I think just like anything else we've been talking about tonight, we might have to look at more effective ways to do business.
I agree with that. I think I've been on the board in the fire department. We had meetings just like this every month, and we had questions. We had to go back to, let's say, the commissioner. Something legal. We'd always table it to the next meeting, and it worked out pretty good. So I just was surprised that I was just off the cuff that I was going to ask Cliff a question, and then I thought about it. I said, you know what? It'll probably cost the district money. I said, I bet not. I waited. So that's all I have on that one.
Okay, and again, I thought as I took in out of the budget and added up all the different legal areas over there, I thought it was a lot more than 110 or 112,000. I was up around 148 if I added all the numbers in. But okay, anything else? Comments here? Anything else, John? You need? I'm trying to provide what you need. Do you want to give the audience a chance to make a comment again? 3 minutes if you want. I'm not
Sure.
No problem with it. Anyone want to say anything?
Mike, before we get off the Cliff
Yep.
thing, I would like to recommend that, as I do realize that sometimes when we call Cliff, we want to have that conversation. It's maybe going to take a little bit more than 5 minutes, and it might have a personal edge on it, and that's fine. But I think typically if somebody from the board needs to talk to Cliff or ask him a question, we could probably ask that question during our meeting. And then at that time, we're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. We're already
Sure.
paying him to be
Sure.
here. And if we have a point during the attorney's report where it's just open and any of the board members can ask the questions.
Again, my only point in bringing this up mainly was that as he's been here for many years, you're right, but he is not a Board of Trustee member. He is there for legal advice. And he gets to be a crutch after a while to a certain degree, which I would do the same thing as everyone else does. Let's just call Cliff and ask a question. Call Cliff and ask a question. Call him and have him review this. And I just think when you're starting to get to the kind of money that we're spending for this small little few $1,000,000 organization, you just have to be careful of how we're using that. That's all.
Back when I worked at the university, they had a policy where if you wanted to speak to legal counsel, you basically called down to the legal office and got in line. And what they did was they would consolidate several cases so that when they were working with an attorney, they would have them for like a full hour, and they would consolidate all the cases. So that worked out pretty good. It was like a clearinghouse, and it's instead of the attorney nickel and diming you, for 2 minutes here, 3 minutes there. That's how they did it back where I retired from.
Okay, again, I applaud the administration, Mr. Coffey and his staff for the budget they put together. As I said, I mention it again in a tattler coming up about if anyone wants to understand anything about the budget, this is a document that tells you what it is. All you have to do is look at it, call the administration, call Mr. Coffey for questions about it. As everyone saw tonight, I had questions that I did not understand in things here. I simply didn't understand what they were. And all you have to do is ask the question, and it's there. It's an excellent document. It's an excellent budget that was put together. We do face some hard times coming up in certain areas, possibly, but I think they've done an excellent job in putting something together that would get us through. With that, I will go to any comments from the public. Nope. Jack went. He didn't. Okay. Anything else good for the organization?
Move to adjourn?
What about, Mr. Coffey, Mr. Nugent brought up, we have our meetings coming up are when for budget workshops?
The next one is next Thursday at 7 p.m.
Thursday, is that the one you're talking about?
Thursday the 25th. 25th.
25th at 7,
Seven.
Thursday. And how many more do we have?
We scheduled 4 just in case. You can use as many.
What he was
or as
asking
you-
about was, they were all scheduled at 7 p.m., I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And that was done way back when because we weren't sure who else was going to be on the board with me. And I was scheduling them around my golf days rather than giving up an afternoon. But, so the next one is in the evening on a,
Yeah, I'm looking at the D&E calendar. The Thursday, there's some random uses throughout the day, so you couldn't move that one to the day.
okay.
If you wanted to, you could shift it to a morning or afternoon on the 23rd, and then you come back for a double bill that night for the board meeting. This room is open all day on the 23rd.
I don't think we'd want to do that, no. I wouldn't be in favor of that, no. Okay, well, we just wanted to check, see if there's one there we could have moved, that's fine. Anything else? Motion to adjourn. So moved, we're adjourned. Did we what?
No.
No.